Hi everyone, welcome back to Rabbi's Reflection. We'll be continuing with our reading of Kitchen Table Wisdom, and today reading the story entitled Remembering. Remembering. What we do to survive is often different from what we may need to do in order to live. My work as a cancer therapist often means helping people to recognize this difference, to get off the treadmill of survival and to refocus their lives. Of the many people who have confronted this issue, one of the most dramatic was an Asian woman of remarkable beauty and style. Through our work together, I realized that some things which can never be fixed can still heal. She was about to begin a year of chemotherapy for ovarian cancer, but this is not what she talked about in our first meeting. She began our work together by telling me she was a, quote, bad person, hard, uncaring, selfish, and unloving. She delivered this self-indictment with enormous poise and certainty. I watched the light play across her perfect skin and the polish of her long black hair, and thought privately that I did not believe her. The people I had known who were truly selfish were rarely aware of it. They simply put themselves first without doubt or hesitation. In a voice filled with shame, Anna began to tell me that she had no heart, and that her phenomenal success in business was a direct result of this ruthlessness. Most important, she felt that it was not possible for her to become well, as she had earned her cancer through her behavior. She questioned why she had come seeking help. There was a silence in which we took each other's measure. Why not start from the beginning? I said. It took her more than 8 months to tell her story. She had not been born here. She had come to this country at 10 as an orphan. She had been adopted by a good family, a family that knew little about her past. With their support, she had built a life for herself. In a voice I could barely hear, she began to speak of her experiences as a child in Vietnam during the war. She began with the death of her parents. She had been 4 years old the morning the Kang had come, small enough to hide in the wooden box that held the rice in the kitchen. The soldiers had not looked there after they had killed the others. When at last they had gone and she ventured from hiding, she had seen that her family had been beheaded. That was the beginning. I was horrified. She continued on. It had been a time of brutality, a world without mercy. She was alone. She had starved. She had been brutalized. Hesitantly at first, and then with growing openness, she told story after story. She had become one of a pack of homeless children. She had stolen, she had betrayed, she had hated, she had helped kill. She had seen things beyond human endurance. Done things beyond imagination. Like a spore, she had become what she needed to survive. As the weeks went by, there was little I could say. Over and over, she would tell me that she was a bad person, a person of darkness. I was filled with horror and pity, wishing to ease her anguish, to offer comfort. Yet she had done these things. I continued to listen. Over and over, a wall of silence and despair threatened to close us off from each other. Over and over, I would beat it back, insisting that she tell me the worst. She would weep and say, "I do not know if I can." And hoping that I would be able to hear it, I would tell her that she must. And she would begin another story. I often found myself not knowing how to respond, unable to do anything but stand with her here. One foot in this peaceful, calm office on the water, the other in a world beyond imagination. I had never been orphaned, never been hunted, never missed a meal except by choice, never violently attacked another person. But I could recognize the whisper of my darkness in hers, and I stood in that place in myself to listen to her, to try to understand. I wanted to jump in, I wanted to soothe, I wanted to make sense, yet none of this was possible. Once, in despair myself, I remember thinking, I am her first witness. Over and over she would cry out, "I have such darkness in me." At such times it seemed to me that the cancer was actually helping her make sense of her life, offering the relief of a feared but long-awaited punishment. At the close of one of her stories, I was overwhelmed by the fact that she had actually managed to live with such memories. I told her this and added, "I am in awe." We sat looking at each other. "It helps me that you say that. I feel less alone." I nodded, and we sat in silence. I was in awe of this woman and her ability to survive. In all the years of working with people with cancer, I had never met anyone like her. I ached for her. Like an animal in a trap that gnaws off its own leg, she had survived, but only at a terrible cost. Gradually, she began to shorten the time frame of her stories, to talk of more recent events, her ruthless business practices, how she used others, always serving her own self-interest. She began to talk about her contempt, her anger, her unkindness, her distrust of people, and her competitiveness. It seemed to me that she was completely alone. Nothing has really changed, I thought. Her whole life was still organized around her survival. Once, at the close of a particularly painful session, I found myself reviewing my own day, noticing how much of the time I was focused on surviving and not on living. I wondered if I too had become caught in survival. How much had I put off living today in order to do or say what was expedient, to get what I thought I needed? Could survival become a habit? Was it possible to live so defensively that you never got to live at all? "You have survived, Anna," I blurted out. "Surely you can stop now." She looked at me, puzzled. But I had nothing further to say. One day she walked in and said, "I have no more stories to tell." "Is it a relief?" I asked her. To my surprise, she answered, "No, it feels empty." "Tell me." She looked away. "I'm afraid I will not know how to survive now." Then she laughed. "But I could never forget," she said. A few weeks after this, she brought in a dream, one of the first she could remember. In the dream, she had been looking in a mirror, seeing herself reflected there to the waist. It seemed to her that she could see through her clothes, through her skin, through to the very depths of her being. She saw that she was filled with darkness and felt a familiar shame, as intense as that she had felt on the first day she had come to my office. Yet she could not look away. Then it seemed to her as if she were moving, as if she had passed through into the mirror, into her own image, and was moving deeper and deeper into her darkness. She went forward blindly for a long time. Then, just as she was certain there was no end, no bottom, that surely this would go on, she seemed to see a tiny spot far ahead. As she moved closer to it, she was able to recognize what it was. It was a rose, a single, perfect rosebud on a long stem. For the first time in 8 months, she began to cry softly, without pain. "It's very beautiful," she told me. "I can see it very clearly, the stem with its leaves and its thorns. It is just beginning to open, and its color is indescribable, the softest, most tender, most exquisite shade of pink." I asked her what this dream meant to her, and she began to sob. "It's mine," she said. "It is still there. All this time, it is still there. It has waited for me to come back for it." The rose is one of the oldest archetypical symbols for the heart. It appears in both the Christian and the Hindu traditions, and in many fairy tales. It presented itself now to Anna, even though she had never read these fairy tales or heard of these traditions. For most of her life, she had held her darkness close to her, had used it as her protection, had even defined herself through it. Now finally she had been able to remember. There was a part she had hidden even from herself, a part she had kept safe, a part that had not been touched. Even more than our experiences, our beliefs become our prisons, but we carry our healing with us even into the darkest of our inner places. A Course in Miracles says, "When I have forgiven myself and remembered who I am, I will bless everyone and everything I see." The way to freedom often lies through the open heart. Thanks for staying all the way to the end with us today. This is quite an intense story today. So beautiful as usual. Wow. I'm always so moved by Dr. Remen's words and her stories. and the lessons that she teaches us. So let's unpack it a little bit so we can have some moments of reflection together. She starts off the story by talking to us about the difference between surviving and living. How often do we realize we're just, as I think she might have said, like running on the treadmill of survival, without giving ourselves a chance to just live and be. Another beautiful dichotomy or distinction that she points out is that between fixing and healing. It's so important. The idea that there are things that can't be fixed, but they can be healed. Fixing and healing are two different things, and healing is always possible. So, obviously, this is an intense story, and Anna, the patient in the story, is quite extreme, just as Dr. Remen feels as well. But that doesn't mean that there isn't something that we can learn from her and learn from that story. Just as Dr. Remen said, this is one of the better quotes of the story that I found, as she's realizing and listening to Anna's stories. But I could recognize the whisper of my darkness in hers. I could recognize the whisper of my darkness in hers. That is a beautiful teaching of empathy. How is it that we can connect to someone who is totally different than us, that has a totally different experience than us? But you can listen to the whispers of those stories. It might not be the exact same story, but each of us carries some type of darkness with us. And when it comes to empathy, it's not just about the darkness. It could be anything. But each of us carries a small bit of what the other person is telling us. The dream of Anna, and as she gets deeper and deeper into the darkness, thinking that there is no end inside of her, she spots the rose and realizes that that's hers, that there is a piece of goodness that's inside of her. What a helpful lesson to all of us, to know that there is a piece of goodness within each and every one of us. And then I'm moved by so much of this writing, but that last paragraph, I think we're just going to read it again because it's so good. Even more than our experiences, our beliefs become our prisons. But we carry our healing with us even into the darkest of our inner places. When I have forgiven myself and remembered who I am, I will bless everyone and everything I see. The way to freedom often lies through the open heart. When we're able to dig deep down into ourselves, into each of us, our deeper selves, be present with who we are, give ourselves a chance of living, we can redeem ourselves. We are never too lost. We are never too far away. We always have a chance of returning back to that inner goodness within ourselves, and to be able to bless ourselves, and in doing so, bless all of those around us. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll be back next week.